Live from Quito, Ecuador, I'm Soini Gray and this is From the South, the daily news brief from Telesur English, and we start this new edition right now. We start in Chile, where Pope Francis met with representatives of the Araucania region. At the meeting, there were 8 representatives of the Mapuche community, a victim of rural violence in the region, and a Haitian immigrant. The lunch was held in the house Mother of Santa Cruz, a few kilometers from the Makewe airfield, where Francisco held Mass earlier today. And after that Mass, Mapuche activist Machi Lincanao tried to give Pope Francis a letter as he passed by in his Pope mobile, but was stopped by security forces. Lincanao said the letter was a plea to the Pope to help the Mapuche who are being incarcerated. Lincanao was acquitted twice in a double murder case. However, the Judicial Court of Tumaco decided to reopen the case and has put her under house arrest. The Mass which Pope Francis celebrated was held at the Makewe Air Base. The location is symbolic because this was the site of the detention center under General Augusto Pinochet's military dictatorship. This was also the land that was taken from the Mapuche in the 20th century. The Chilean government has recognized this as their rightful ancestral property, but has not returned the land to the people. The community used this opportunity to voice their dissatisfaction.
Our families and spiritual leaders were disappeared, and some of them had to leave their lands behind. What does it mean to us that the Pope apologizes? That doesn't return our territories back to us. The dignity of our people will not return to us either.
Pope Francis also met in private with victims of sexual abuse by Catholic priests on Tuesday evening. Crowds waved as the Pope arrived at the papal nunciature in Santiago for the meeting behind closed doors. Earlier in the day, Francis said he wanted to join with his brother bishops in asking for forgiveness for the abuse by members of the clergy. But some of the abuse victims were not satisfied with the Pope's words. They and their supporters protested with black balloons as the Pope mobile made its way through the Chilean capital. They said the bishops responsible for covering up the abuse should be in jail.
Pope Francis has been welcomed by crowds of Chileans and authorities which described his presence as a blessing for the nation. However, indigenous groups, human rights organizations, social movements and individuals are protesting against his visit. Abuse victims also joined the crowds in Santiago on Tuesday to denounce Pope Francis, speaking out against the Church's record on covering up abuse scandals and reportedly protecting its officials mired in allegations. The demonstrators carried black balloons, which they released into the air close to when the pontiff was passing through.
As head of a group of criminal priests, he's responsible. He should hand them over to justice and follow the normal channels just like any other normal citizen. However, he protects and hides them. This is what we saw with Bishop Barros, who was at Mass next to him in O'Higgins Park. In reality, it will be a great step forward if he recognizes that he is a criminal who covers up for other criminals.
As the Pope was making his way to hold a Mass in Santiago's O'Higgins Park, police forces clashed with several demonstrators and used water cannons to repress them. Several people were chased down and detained.
For us, the Pope's visit hurts us deeply. I repeat, this does not have to do with faith. We do not want conflict with those people who feel something for this man. What worries us is that there are government officials who are involved in economic crimes. And there they are, sitting in there. Our Chilean criminals who work for the government are sitting in there with that man.
LGBT members in Santiago staged a protest where they kissed in front of the police to protest what they believe is a discriminatory treatment of the Church towards the LGBT community.
Regarding the Pope's visit, he is here doing his thing, and we are here to take advantage so we can highlight the problems we have with the Church. I don't believe that he has come here to resolve anything. He comes here to hold a Mass, to carry out an activity, and we have to be able to get around that so that we can show that we truly need help.
Footage shows police bundling a number of protesters into the back of vans. Also in Santiago, protesters dressed as nuns and denounced the high cost of the visit. The Chilean Church's involvement in sexual abuse scandals also came up for protesters, and the Catholic Church's popularity in Chile is now the lowest in Latin America. Many now see it as a pillar of the conservative establishment.
Pope Francis, who said there will be zero tolerance in sex abuse case in the church, named Bishop Juan Barros, who had been accused of covering up the biggest pedophile of the Chilean church history, and following the reaction of rejection from the community and from the clergy, he called us idiots.
Since last week, protesters have launched firebombs on at least 4 churches, including on Tuesday, Cuenco's local chapel. This visit by the Pope to Chile and Peru has seen perhaps the strongest protests against the Catholic Church of any of the Latin American tours. As the Pontiff now journeys on to the city of Temuco, near the Mapuche community areas, it remains to be seen what further objections, demonstrations and actions will be staged against his presence.
Our correspondent in Lima, Veronica Insausti, has more on the Pope's upcoming visit to Peru.
Pope Francis is expected to arrive tomorrow in the capital Lima at 5:30 p.m. local time. There are no public activities scheduled, and he will only have a meeting with bishops at the papal nunciature in Lima. On Friday, he will have a very intense agenda. Early in the morning, he will travel to the Amazonian city of Puerto Maldonado, where he will offer a public mass and meet with representatives from 2,500 Amazonian communities from Bolivia, Brazil, and Peru. He is expected to deliver a message in reference to the Laudato Si encyclical in favor of protecting the environment and to call out authorities for the increasing levels of deforestation in the lungs of the world, as the Amazon rainforest has been called. After that, he will return to Lima in the afternoon, where he will have a brief meeting at the presidential palace with President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, which the official agenda says will only last 15 minutes. He is expected to refer to the political situation now that Peru is facing one of its worst crises in decades. On Saturday, he will be in Trujillo and will offer a big mass in Huanchaco, where 500,000 people are expected to attend. In the afternoon, he will bless several Peruvian virgins, including the Mutupe and Otusco virgins, at the Trujillo. Finally, on Sunday, on his last day in the country, he will have various activities. He will visit Lima Cathedral, the sanctuary of the Lord of the Miracles. He will have a lunch with the bishops, and at 4 p.m. local time, 2 million pilgrims will be waiting for him at the Air Force Esplanade of Las Palmas for another Mass. After this, he will return to Rome.
We thank Veronica for that report. 32 bodies have been found in 3 mass graves in the municipality of Jalisco on the Mexican Pacific coast. Another 9 bodies were found last Saturday. Authorities say more could be found in coming days as the search for more graves continues. According to the National Registry of Missing Persons, 143 people have disappeared in Nayarit. 140 of them went missing in 2017. And the U.S. Treasury has warned U.S. investors to approach Venezuela's proposed petro-cryptocurrency with caution, saying that it may contravene U.S. financial sanctions against Venezuela. The warning follows President Nicolas Maduro's announcement this month that his government will soon issue 100 million petros backed by an equivalent number of barrels of oil, partly to get around the U.S. sanctions. And we have more news in a minute, so stay with us. In Ecuador, the leader and founder of the Citizens' Revolution, former President Rafael Correa, has officially disaffiliated himself from Alianza País. That's after the electoral dispute court confirmed Lenin Moreno as the leader of the ruling party. The court's decision has ramifications through the ranks.
The Electoral Court of Ecuador rejected the appeal presented by Gabriela Rivadeneira, removing her from her duty as Executive Secretary of the Alliance Movement. The court's verdict reaffirms Ricardo Zambrano as Secretary of the movement, who announced that a national convention will be held in the first quarter of the year. Zambrano has dismissed the party's defectors.
Leaving behind the intolerance, Alianza País will integrate the largest number of followers in its history.
Former President Correa leaves after 11 years of leading the party, along with his party co-founder, Ricardo Pantiño, and other senior members.
Who can deny that Gabriela Rivadeneira is our executive secretary? And who knows Ricardo Zambrano, that opportunist? Who can deny that me, the one who's talking, and Ricardo Patiño are the founders of this movement?
This statement sparked the immediate reaction of several Alliance País executives who voted to ban the Correa faction from the party's headquarters.
They
rule they will be able to stay in properties and with an official name. It is appropriate for them because Alliance País was the first organization of its kind in the country.
The assemblies and militants who gathered at the Alianza País headquarters placed a plaque condemning President Moreno. They then went to the National Electoral Council to register the new movement of the Citizen Revolution.
In Trinidad and Tobago, the environmental group Fishermen and Friends of the Sea successfully obtained a temporary injunction to halt a $59 million highway extension in East Trinidad. General Secretary of the group, Gary Aboud, claims the highway will damage the environmentally sensitive Oripo savanna, which is home to several species, including the red-bellied macaw. The temporary injunction will last until Monday, when there will be another hearing. We spoke to Mr. Aboud earlier today about why he mounted the challenge.
There is a level of transparency and consultation that's supposed to occur. We were informed of the fact that the 9 technical officers who work in the environmental agency all condemned the applicant because the applicant never supplied critical data to review the application, such as baseline data. Now, this area is an environmentally sensitive area which is legislated for the highest degree of protection. Only one of 3 places in the entire country. This area that you see here, if the camera, when the drone is complete on this filming, you realize that what they're supposed to put is a buffer zone that is 1.5 times wider than the highway. That's the highway you're looking at there, and it's cutting through a forest reserve. There are also issues about the forest reserve, but outside of the forest reserve is this environmentally sensitive area which contains biodiversity that you cannot imagine. It contains plants, for instance, that eat insects, a very rare and sought after item. But the critical issue here is that in the first instance, they didn't grant the approval lawfully because there was no consultation as required in law.
Trinidad and Tobago held its state funeral for former President George Maxwell Richards on Wednesday. The statesman's casket was taken through the streets of Port of Spain. The former president's body lay in state for the last 2 days. The country's Prime Minister and opposition leader were among the hundreds of mourners at the National Academy for Performing Arts. Richards, who died of a heart attack, was the country's 4th president. His time in office spanned 2003 to 2013.
And so it was that, like Brian Lara, his number 4 counterpart on the West Indies cricket team at that time, former President Richards turned out to be one of the finest talents ever seen by the game. Like Brian, he carried the aspirations and the values of a nation on his shoulders for a decade. And when finally he laid down the uneasy crown of public life that had been his to wear for 10 years, he handed over an office that had, by dint of his efforts during that time, been polished into an orb that was capable of illuminating an entire country.
The 10th CARIFORM Crime and Security Cooperation Program has been launched in Barbados. As CARICOM Secretary General Erwin LaRocque explains, the region is plagued by a drug and arms problem that didn't originate within their shores. He says the program will address that by fusing community outreach with a heightened national security effort, allowing the Caribbean to attack the scourge from all sides.
Beyond the toll taken on people and society, crime and violence have become very costly to the region's economy and have an adverse effect on foreign investment and tourism. More than ever, we need to remain united in our efforts to fight crime in all its dimensions. The onus is on us to provide a secure community for all our people.
The Honduran opposition party has announced the start of a 7-day-long national strike as part of protests on the electoral fraud charges being lobbed at current President Juan Orlando Hernandez.
The Opposition Alliance announced that starting on January 20th, protesters will start closing down roads and pressuring neighborhoods and communities to join the fight.
We have called for peaceful demonstrations, but we also recognize that civil insurrection is the people's constitutional right in order to restore elections that are democratic, just, and free.
These types of measures will only grow more frequent as Inauguration Day on January 27th approaches.
First, on January 20th at 6 a.m., we will mobilize on all public roads where we must resist at all times. Then, on January 21st, we will mobilize in Tegucigalpa towards Congress along the Alianza representatives.
Opposition leaders have also said they will only accept to join talks if a prestigious international mediator is present, and this would need to happen before the 27th.
It could be a man or a woman, a former president, someone who has earned international merits. Just like a mediator was chosen during the war with El Salvador. It could even be 2 or 3 people.
Leaders have also talked about a new constituent national assembly, different from the assembly some sectors in support of the current government want to create.
Every time there's a rupture in the rule of law, this needs to be rebuilt through a national dialogue, which in turn is a constituent national assembly. There's been horrible manipulation going on in Honduras regarding this topic. We want a proper assembly, unlike our rivals.
In the opposition's announcement, they also asked the armed forces to stop using violence against the people so that there aren't more deaths during this fight.
Political violence against human rights defenders, social leaders, and former FARC guerrillas continues in Colombia. Different sectors are demanding the government guarantee their safety. More in the next report.
Using this pamphlet, the Autodefensa Gautanista paramilitary are threatening the FARC political party in Valle de Cauca. They warn of a plan to blow up their headquarters and murder their members. A FARC spokesman has rejected these intimidation tactics and stressed that they continue working towards peace and reconciliation.
We want it to be known that our party is working openly, legally, and with open hearts to everyone so we may walk the path to absolution, to reconciliation and hope. We welcome all of you to work with us, to not allow us to become dispirited, and to continue the fight for a new Colombia that will serve the masses.
The pamphlet is also threatening social and victim organizations, as well as community leaders. 116 social leaders were murdered in 2016, and 173 in 2017. Likewise, 40 former FARC members and 12 of their family members have been murdered since the peace treaty was signed. In the past 2 years, political violence has claimed at least 341 victims.
Campesino leaders who are asking for land reparations are being targeted in particular. Other targets include human rights defenders and community leaders. As such, we are worried that the government is breaching their commitment to protect social leaders' lives.
On top of a lack of a guarantee for their life, there's also the government's denial of how systematic the crimes are, or about the political violence behind it all.
las amenazas sí tienen efectivamente.
Threats have a central objective, which are to create fear, to sow fear in the population, to immobilize people and prevent organization. They want people to lose their political rights. This is alarming, because it's endangering what hope we have for the political transformation of Colombia. If people are afraid during an electoral period, they will simply stay at home.
Those facing threats and intimidation fear that political violence will be normalized. They fear that indifference and indolence by the Colombian government will reign supreme. They fear that lost lives will stop having meaning and become nothing but numbers.
And we'll be back very soon, so stay with us. Bail has been denied for the Palestinian teenager Ahed al-Tamimi, who was filmed slapping an Israeli soldier. Tamimi and her mother will remain in custody during her trial, which is set to begin January 31st. This means she could be detained for months. Israel's military court has decided to charge the 16-year-old with 12 counts, including assault and indictment for the event seen in the video and 5 other incidents. She could also face a lengthy prison sentence if she is convicted. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad Maliki arrived in Venezuela on his first official visit this year to strengthen relations between the two nations. Maliki met with his counterpart, Jorge Arreaza, and reiterated that both countries are fighting against the same challenges, referring to U.S. interference. He also met with the president of the Constituent Assembly, Delcy Rodriguez, and he thanked Venezuela for its support of Palestine. The U.S. government has cut more than half of its funding to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees. The State Department announced they are withholding $65 million of the $125 million budget. The move comes after President Trump threatened to cut the funding in early January in retaliation to Palestinian anger over his recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The UNRWA offers food, education, and social services to more than 5 million registered Palestinian refugees. The Palestinian Liberation Organization has condemned the U.S. decision to cut the budget.
This is the main issue. What is the American administration looking forward to? The so-called deal of the century, which is set on deleting the rights of Palestinians. President Trump announced Jerusalem as the capital of the occupation, but he doesn't have the right to do so, in a move against the international law and agreements, in an attempt to dismiss Jerusalem as an eternal capital of Palestine. Jerusalem will always be the capital of Palestine. The other issue is that he's trying to cut the aid for UNRWA and put more pressure to delete the refugees' right of return.
At its first session after the elections held in December, Catalonia's parliament has chosen pro-independence Roger Torrent as its new speaker. The newly elected speaker called for unity as the parliament prepares to form a new government. Lawmakers also discussed the possibility that Carles Puigdemont could be sworn in as president from Belgium, a decision that depends on the Catalan Parliamentary Committee. And our correspondent Joan Ortiz has more details in the next report.
We are standing outside the Parliament of Catalonia, where its new speaker has been chosen and sworn in during this first session. Roger Torrent was elected on his second round of votes, as the pro-independence parties couldn't reach an absolute majority, since 5 of their elected congressmen are in Brussels, and couldn't cast their votes, opposed to the 3 other lawmakers in jail who voted from prison. The parliament session started around 11 a.m. and lasted for more than 2 hours, although Catalonia, the seats for the Catalonian government. The most important in the building were empty, as well as those that were to be occupied by the 3 jail leaders. These chairs were replaced by yellow ribbons, a symbol to demand the freedom of the pro-independence leaders. parliamentarian Ernesto Maragall, the oldest politician in parliament, made the opening speech during this first session and said that on the day of the referendum, the people of Catalonia became owners of their destiny. He added that the Spanish government doesn't want to hear about a shared sovereignty, humiliating and punishing Catalonia. Roger Torrent, the parliament's new speaker, also spoke and said that today the institutions that were intervened by the Spanish government are finally recovering. The next challenge for the parliament is to figure out how to swear in Charles Puigdemont, who remains in Belgium. Parliament has 10 days to set a date for this event and define how it's going to be done.
The two Koreas will march together under one flag during the Winter Olympics, taking place in South Korea in February. South Korea's chief negotiator said that both countries will also participate in joint cultural events and will compete as a unified team at the sports event for the first time. This decision comes after South and North Korea started talks in January, a respite from North Korea's pursuit of nuclear and missile program. Bitcoin got hammered again today, falling below to $10,000 for the first time since December. That means it's lost more than half of its value since it peaked just 5 weeks ago. Virtual currencies are taking a knocking amid fears a bubble has formed in the market. There are also concerns South Korea will crack down on cryptocurrency trading. The country is the world's third biggest market for Bitcoin trading, behind Japan and the United States. A plea for mercy for the convicted bookkeeper of Auschwitz has been rejected. 96-year-old Oscar Groening was sentenced to 4 years in prison in 2015 for being an accessory to murder at the Auschwitz death camp in Poland, but has yet to start his sentence because of ill health. Groening admitted he was guilty of sorting banknotes seized from Jews and sending them to Berlin to fund the Nazi war effort. This court battle is one of the last trials related to the Holocaust, which saw the murder of 6 million Jews. Dozens of pets have received the blessing of a priest at San Anton Church in central Madrid during St. Anthony's Day. Dogs, cats, birds, and even guinea pigs are sprayed with holy water in a ritual their owners believe will help keep their pets safe and healthy. Every January, dozens of Catholics in Spain groom their pets with their best outfits to attend a mass in honor of St. Anthony, the patron saint of animals. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, tellusyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sonia Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
Events told by their main figures. Research findings that transcend our people's views.